Right now, somewhere, a guy is watching a girl twirl her hair and thinking, she's into me. And he might be completely wrong. Here's the unsettling truth. Your body is talking before your brain gives it permission to, but most people are reading the wrong dictionary. Today, I'm not giving you a checklist. I'm giving you the actual psychology of attraction, the stuff researchers have spent decades trying to measure, and why it's way more interesting than she touched her hair, she likes you. Here's what almost every video on this topic gets wrong. It treats body language like a code. Hair touch equals interest. Eye contact equals attraction. Foot pointing equals she wants you. That's not psychology. That's fortune-telling with extra steps. Real nonverbal science says something different and honestly more powerful. Attraction doesn't show up as a single signal. It shows up as a pattern, a cluster of small involuntary shifts that happen together in context that you can't fully fake and usually can't fully hide. So let's go through 4 real psychological mechanisms, not party tricks, that actually show up in attraction research. Proximity might be the single most honest part of human body language, mainly because it's the part we're worst at controlling. Psychologists who study this call it proxemics, and the foundational work goes back to an anthropologist named Edward Hall in the 1960s, who noticed something simple but profound. Every culture has invisible bubbles of space around a person, and how close someone stands to you without asking permission tells you something about the relationship your nervous system has already decided you're in. Here's why that matters so much. Standing close to another human being is not neutral. From an evolutionary standpoint, allowing another body into your immediate space is something your brain treats as a low-grade risk calculation, even when you're not consciously thinking about it. That's why strangers on a crowded train avoid eye contact and angle their bodies away even when they can't physically move. They're trying to manage discomfort about a violated boundary they didn't choose. So when someone voluntarily erases that boundary around you again and again, without being forced to by circumstance, that's not nothing. They are overriding a default setting that most people maintain automatically. This is also why proximity is so much more interesting than something like a smile or a compliment. A smile can be polite, a compliment can be strategic. But closing physical distance requires overriding an instinct, and instincts are expensive to override. It takes a reason. The psychological question worth asking isn't, did she stand close to me? It's, what's strong enough to be outcompeting her normal instinct for personal space right now? Now, the responsible caveat, because this is where most content about body language goes wrong. Proximity is context-dependent in a way that makes it unreliable as a solo signal. A crowded bar will compress everyone's space whether they like each other or not. A loud room will push people to lean in just to be heard. Cultural background changes baseline comfort zones dramatically. What reads as close in one culture is just normal conversational distance in another. So proximity by itself is noisy data. What makes it meaningful is repetition and initiation. If someone keeps closing distance that you didn't create across multiple moments, in situations where they had other options, open seats, quieter conversations, more space available, that consistency is what separates signal from circumstance. One instance is noise. A pattern, especially one they initiate without external pressure, starts to look like information. So the real psychological insight isn't closeness equals interest. It's that physical space is one of the few things people manage almost entirely unconsciously, which makes it harder to fake than a smile or a compliment, but it still needs context and repetition before it actually means something. Mirroring might be the most quietly fascinating thing your nervous system does because it happens entirely without your permission. Psychologists call it the chameleon effect, a term coined from research by Tanya Chartrand and John Bargh in the late 1990s, and what they found was almost unsettling in its simplicity. When two people feel rapport, their bodies start to sync. Posture matches. Gestures echo each other a few seconds apart. Even speech rhythm and tone start to align. None of this is something either person decides to do. It happens beneath conscious awareness, which is exactly what makes it psychologically interesting. Think about why this would even exist. Mirroring is believed to be tied to empathy circuits in the brain, the same neural systems that let you wince when you watch someone get hurt or smile reflexively when someone smiles at you. When your brain is engaged with another person and processing them as someone worth paying attention to, it starts modeling their physical state, almost like a low-level simulation running in the background. The output of that simulation leaks into your own body. You lean when they lean. You cross your arms moments after they do. You're not copying them on purpose. Your brain is just that absorbed in tracking them. This is why mirroring feels so validating when people notice it happening between them. It's hard to fake convincingly, and it's almost impossible to consciously sustain over a long conversation without it feeling robotic. Real mirroring has a natural delay and imperfection to it, a few seconds lag, not a perfect copy, which is part of what makes it read as genuine connection rather than mimicry. But here's the catch that most content about this skips entirely, and it's the most important part. Mirroring is a signal of rapport, not specifically romantic attraction. It shows up between old friends catching up, between a great therapist and their client, between two coworkers who just clicked on a project. Your brain doesn't reserve this mechanism for romantic interest. It fires whenever it perceives genuine social engagement and comfort. So if you notice someone mirroring you, the accurate psychological read is, this person feels engaged and at ease with me, not, this person is romantically interested in me. Those are overlapping circles, not the same circle. What makes mirroring worth paying attention to isn't using it as proof of anything specific. It's that it tells you connection has a physical signature, that real engagement between two people shows up in the body before either person could put it into words. Whether that engagement is friendship, professional respect, or attraction is a separate question that mirroring alone can't answer. It just tells you that something real is happening between you, and that's worth noticing on its own. Pupil dilation might be the strangest piece of psychology on this list because it's the one signal that's almost impossible to fake. You can practice a smile in the mirror. You can train yourself to lean in or hold eye contact a beat longer, but you cannot consciously make your pupils dilate. That's controlled by the autonomic nervous system, the same system that handles your heartbeat and breathing, completely outside of voluntary control, which is exactly what makes the research on this so compelling. The foundational work here comes from a psychologist named Eckhard Hess in the 1960s. He ran experiments showing people photographs and measuring their pupil response, and found something remarkable. Pupils widen involuntarily when someone looks at a person or image they find stimulating or attractive. It's not symbolic. It's a direct physiological reaction happening in real time, governed by activation in the nervous system rather than by any decision the person is making. In a strange way, it's one of the most honest signals the human body produces, because the part of your brain that controls it doesn't consult the part of your brain that manages your social performance. Here's why this matters psychologically. Attraction isn't just an emotional or mental state. It has a measurable physiological signature. When someone is genuinely engaged by what they're looking at, their nervous system shifts into a state of heightened arousal, and pupil dilation is one of the visible byproducts of that shift. It's the same category of response as a faster heartbeat or a slight flush, small, involuntary, and revealing precisely because it bypasses conscious control. But this is where the responsible caveat becomes essential, and it's a big one. Pupils dilate for reasons that have nothing to do with attraction. Dim lighting alone will widen pupils regardless of who's standing in front of someone. Caffeine affects it. Fear affects it. Excitement, anger, even physical pain can trigger the same response, because the nervous system doesn't dilate pupils specifically for romantic interest. It dilates them for arousal in the broadest sense. And arousal can come from a dozen different emotional sources that all look identical from the outside. So on its own, in a dim restaurant or a low-lit bar, pupil dilation tells you almost nothing reliable because the environment is already doing most of the work. What makes it meaningful is context. Bright, evenly lit conditions, where lighting can be ruled out as the cause, combined with other signals happening at the same time. In that narrower context, dilation becomes a genuinely interesting piece of the puzzle, a small, involuntary window into someone's nervous system state. But treating it as a standalone signal, especially anywhere lighting varies, is exactly the kind of oversimplification that makes body language advice unreliable in practice. Self-soothing behaviors are probably the most misunderstood category in all of body language psychology, and once you understand why, you'll never look at a checklist of signs she likes you the same way again. These are the small, repetitive actions people do almost unconsciously, touching the neck, playing with a necklace, running fingers through hair, fidgeting with a ring or a sleeve. Psychologists sometimes call them adapters, and they share one core function. They help regulate internal nervous system arousal. They're not designed to communicate anything to another person. They're designed to help the person doing them cope with what's happening inside their own body. Here's the part that matters most. Your nervous system doesn't have a separate setting for nervous, and a separate setting for excited, and a separate setting for attracted. Physiologically, those states overlap heavily: elevated heart rate, a surge of activation, a kind of restless energy that needs somewhere to go. That shared pathway is exactly why self-soothing behaviors get so wildly overinterpreted in pop psychology content. A hair touch can be a release valve for romantic interest. It can just as easily be a release valve for social anxiety, for the discomfort of being asked a direct question, or for simply not knowing what to do with your hands while talking to someone you've just met. This is the single biggest flaw in the body parts that prove she likes you genre. It treats adapters as a one-to-one code, gesture equals meaning, when the actual psychology says these behaviors are about internal state, not about the other person specifically. Someone could be touching their neck because of you, or because their presentation is in 20 minutes, or because the room is too warm and they're subtly uncomfortable. The behavior is completely real and completely involuntary. The single cause explanation people assign to it is the part that isn't supported by the science. So what actually makes these behaviors worth noticing? Not the gesture itself, but its relationship to context and timing. If someone's self-soothing behaviors increase specifically around a particular topic, or specifically when a particular person enters the conversation, or specifically during moments of eye contact, that's more informative than the gesture in isolation. It suggests something about that specific context is driving the arousal, rather than general background stress the person is carrying around regardless of who's in the room. The deeper insight here is almost a relief, honestly. You don't need to become a forensic expert in micro-gestures to understand people better. You need to understand that humans are walking around with nervous systems constantly trying to self-regulate, and small physical habits are often just visible proof of that internal effort, nothing more sinister or more romantic than that on their own. Reading a single adapter as definitive proof of attraction isn't insight. It's noise mistaken for signal. The real skill is noticing patterns over time, in context, and staying genuinely willing to be wrong.